Hey everybody, or anybody. All right, shout out to Evan.
Hello, Evan.
Gotta send me the link so I can send it to Evan.
So Pete, while we're on the roof, I was starting to talk about this algorithmic poetry, which I was working on.
Right.
And, it was in the news like a couple weeks ago. OpenAI trained this special kind of neural network called like a transformer neural network, which uses attention in a new way to like generate stuff like text.
What do you mean attention though?
Like it'll pay attention to different parts of the sentence and, how they fit into. So like it'll have different attention heads, they're called. And like one of them they'll notice.
By the way, I can only, it's not going off this camera. It's going off this camera.
Both.
Is it?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Why can we only see this one?
Oh, I just mean that's recording, not live.
Oh, okay. So the actual showing will be different.
We're recording a 3D video.
Okay. All right.
To be later released.
Word up. So you were saying attention based.
Yeah, so like they'll be training these like attention heads, which like one of them they find like starts attending to like the subject of the sentence or like the verb or like what a pronoun refers to.
Okay.
And it can kind of tell like based on the semantics of the word, what to pay attention to, like at a given moment as it's processing a word itself. So they have a nice algorithm that basically, traditionally you would have these things called recurrent neural networks. And the idea is like, suppose you wanted to give it a sentence, so you feed in a word at a time, A, B, C. And it has connections, so as it's like going along, you feed in A.
Yep.
And then you feed in B, but meanwhile A is like, comes back around.
Right, because that's the
as
relevance.
Forward, yeah, also, exactly. The neurons kind of connect back to the previous letter.
Okay. Makes sense to me.
So then if you want to like understand like what happened 10 words back, you have to fill in the network 10 times, go through the whole process. Well, that's kind of expensive. Well, so they just have a way of instead getting a similar effect, being able to pay attention to things across time, but where it just basically comes down to like a single matrix multiplication. So it's like way faster, whatever, for a technical reason. And
so it's like whatever component seems to be shown most strongly in the original matrix is sort of just like multiplied.
Yeah, it's like it sort of knows about like all the different, say, like words, and then it knows what words are like in the current context, and then it finds like sort of their associations, and then sort of like masks what it's looking at, like kind of zeroes out, like kind of ignores certain things to better like hone in on like what's most relevant. So there's a really cool video. Maybe we'll put a link in the description of such a neural network, and you can see it's like playing a beautiful piano piece that it's hallucinated. And you see the score, and it animates at any given moment which moments in the past are like most influencing. It's like thinking about as it's playing this note, and you see it like imagine it's like what's happening in the brain.
Which is kind of like what inspiration would be, right? That would be the thing that would be driving you forward in a given moment. Right.
Yeah, well, it's like
kind of works the same as that.
It's able to do like patterns. Like for example, in the text case, it'll generate like a whole essay. It understands like topic, sentence.
How much do you have to give it?
Okay, well, so the hilarious thing was that they were like, we trained it on like this huge corpus of text, and it's like so good that we're not going to release it to the public because like they can't handle it because we're worried about deep fake like text.
Oh, they're worried like people
politically,
Wow.
So anyway, this got like a headline. Now, it is really good. One thing that is true also is that they release some of the code and like a simple model, like a small one. And then more recently, they released, someone wrote some code to like train on your own corpus. So like I was training all my
corpus
own
is your
text.
body of work,
Your
that,
body
you,
of work.
that you've submitted to make it
Corpus.
iterate from.
So yeah, so like I have the million-word Matthew corpus, and I've been training on that for a couple of days.
Wait, you have a corpus? Your personal body of work that you submitted to this thing was 1 million words worth of stuff?
Well, with some repetition, but yeah, close to 1 million words.
Wow.
It's just like journals and
Right. Well, that's pretty
and
cool,
fiction
though.
and poetry and whatever it is. Okay, so blah 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 blah. It's very fun to like especially when I'm
It kind of makes me think of the idea of because they say on average you only speak 2 million words in your lifetime.
Oh, that can't.
Apparently that's true. And so maybe I wonder, but then a lot of writers are kind of quiet, but they write a lot. And so it's like, well, maybe they actually have so much to say that they feel self-conscious about saying it out loud, and they need to get it written down. And so actually being such a fan of speaking, they must be quiet. Write it down. It's kind of a funny anomaly, or not anomaly. It's funny. Like
I think there's definitely a kernel of truth to that. I think
like,
also, there's like a funny thing when you're sitting there like thinking about language, because it's you can think about a whole sentence at a time. You know what I mean? Like
multiple.
So this neural network can do that too, basically. Different like scales of time. And so, one of the things I thought was interesting about like the whole experience was being like really sometimes feeling like, okay, this is what I sound like when no one understands what I'm talking about. Like it's just babbling on about, some like math or something. And I'm like, okay, well, if no one knew what a polynomial was, like this is exactly, this is, because it really just gets the style, not the content. But sometimes, like, especially when I'm like, there's like a poem where it's just like words and I'm just sort of shifting them around myself in the poem. When it generates like a poem in that style, it'll take like sort of philosophical terms and it permutes them around and like ends up like sometimes saying stuff that sounds like actually like pretty profound. You're like, ooh. This is in the spirit of what I was doing. Like the subject of this piece to begin with was like the fact that there's this cool pattern. So I was playing with the pattern. Well, the neural network picked up on the pattern and it could play with it as good as I could, like, in its limited way. But, enough to make the poem, like, I'd be like, all right, this is mine. Okay, so then I suggested to, when you're talking upstairs, like, kind of like a social network where, you write stuff, but then the neural network kind of anonymizes your text in a way. You choose, what generated text, like, represent you as opposed to showing anyone, anything you've written. And
that's interesting.
But then you pointed out that it's like, well, that's just a world in which no one has to take responsibility for anything they say, because they can always just be like, oh, I didn't say that evil shit. Like,
that was just the algorithm.
That was just the algorithm.
Well, also it reminds me of like the great adage of the mystic and the religion, of like, so you got a mystic and they're like feeling mystical shit as one does, and they are having these ecstatic transcendent experiences, however often. And a true mystic from a societal point of view is one that can imbue their spaces with mysticism so that others can experience it, right? And so, like conversely, somebody who's like really spiritual, but they're like a hermit, isn't really considered a mystic. You know what I mean? And so anyway, but then, so what inevitably happens? Oh my God, I'm having this crazy experience. I can't wait. I'm going to be around this person all the time. Oh my God, so-and-so. Can you believe it? This guy making me feel these mystical things. I want to experience mystical things. Well, you should come next Tuesday. We don't do Sundays. We do Tuesdays. And I'm like, all right, my Tuesday's open. So then, it just compounds and compounds. And so in the beginning, it's like this tight-knit sort of group, right? And maybe it's more easily policed because the stuff that's being produced and the infrastructure that's being built is easier to view and curtail and manage and remanage and destroy and alter and create. But then it gets to a point where then you're like, well, Jesus is dead now. And, oh yeah, all the like apostles, like most of them got like brutally killed. So, or at least some of them. And so then like these other people that are like, wow, yeah, these mystical writings have carried on and I feel them too. And they're like, man, I can't wait to take all the gold and put it in this giant church because I love it so much.
And that's how I need to express.
Yeah, and then it's like, oh man. And in some ways, it's so funny because it's like these people. It's not even to say much about the mysticism itself. It's just to say people's relationship with anything, but in this case, the mysticism, right? Like, because if somebody is a grandiose motherfucker, that's the type of person who's going to be like, I need to take all the gold and put it in this giant structure that represents this thing that's very important to me. The same person who's like, I fucking hate people that have different points of view than me, and I have zero tolerance for it, are those people are going to have a higher penchant to be like, let's burn people at the stake. And so anyway, it flows out from what it was. And so at some point, the religion is born, and the mysticism maybe doesn't die, but it is irrevocably altered within the very thing that it was sort of apparently housed in the first place. And it could never be brought back to what it was in that space. You have people that do Jesus like shit, but they're not going to ever do those things ever again on that level of what's considered like Jesus like shit in the Catholic Church. And so then my point back to the algorithm is, you're like, okay, Matt has a tendency to sometimes give this analogy of like, man, it was so funny, it just brought the house down. And then like the algorithms just like brought the house down. And then like Matthew's like fucking algorithm makes an entire manifesto on how like the destruction of Philadelphia is necessary for the laughter of its inhabitants. Or some and they're like, what the fuck, Matthew? It wasn't me. It's just the algorithm.
Yeah. No, I totally. I see what you're saying. I mean, there's a great William Morris quote. I don't know if I'm going to remember the whole thing, but
I got a great quote for you
too. Like, people, as you say, it's like you fight for a certain ideal under a certain name, and then like maybe you lose a few battles, but like the name like gets a certain reputation, but then like people glom onto it, and like all of a sudden the word means a different thing. Yeah, and a new generation has to arise and like fights for the same ideals, but under like
a new guys
names. Yeah, under new guys.
This is a feeling. It's not about the name.
Yeah, exactly. Now, so like, what?
Hold on. There's a great one. There's a great. This isn't even the quote I wanted to say, but there is a great quote, a Jay-Z quote about that. Y'all. He's like, y'all know what the name is? WILLIE. Nobody truer than HOV. And so he's saying, will. It's about will, the desire to do things. And then he's like, IE. Nobody's truer than me. However, WILLIE spells Willie. And so, it carries on further.
Nice. I like this. The, what you said reminded me of. So I was thinking about, like,
what were you thinking about? There is something that I want to say.
Yeah, I just want to.
Okay. You got it?
Just queuing it up. So you have this distancing feeling when you're like looking at your own poetry being spat back at you.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think, like the saving grace of it, like what I found most interesting about it is like, because a human's not there, it's like it's fully controlled by the words. And so just
There's
as
almost
like
an innocence to it.
exactly, that's exactly what I was gonna say. It's like literally gonna use that word. Yeah, totally. There's an innocence to it because it's just
you don't know any better than what you've been told.
Exactly. It's just playing with the same words, and so you looking at it, like one feels suddenly like, wow, like we are so controlled by language in so many invisible ways.
Look at this apparently supercomputer, like it's so super duper in the sense, look how fast it iterates. But then it's like, look at what it does with its iteration. You often look at that with, I think about that with beings all the time. You're like, oh, well, like, it's not a coincidence that this person, like, became this a lot of times. Like, sometimes I don't have any idea how people come to be who they are. But sometimes, and especially, even in, like, really bad cases, you're like, I'm like, yeah, I can see how that person snapped and did a school shooting. And I'm like, that's probably never going to happen to me. And I just say probably because, and not never, because first of all, I think that if you think things like that, you might never be wary in your mind to the ways that might happen.
Yeah.
And then you end up being the motherfucker you thought you never would be. There's that. But then also, the other thing is, if I start going down that path, my mind would have to be so fucked and is so lack of self-awareness to what it is now that if that was happening, if that was happening, like maybe it would, maybe that is the most logical thing. But you see these people and you're like, oh wow, like you eat terrible food, you don't exercise, you look at a screen all day, you communicate with people that do the same thing. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of coagulation with not a lot of flow and not a lot of area for things to be cleaned and sort of burnt up in the sacrifice of themselves and contributing to anything that is greater than this current moment. This is all about the indulgence of the now. It's like, in some ways, a donut is good for you, truly, because you can derive pleasure from it. And it is important to experience pleasure and happiness. However, it's not the end all be all. And if you thought that, you might think that, oh, well then the most healthy thing I could do is instant gratification.
Sure. Like one needs like a little self-consciousness about like the origin of a need. What is a need? Is everything natural?
I would argue everything is natural. Like even in a chemical plant where they're making like some weird polymer that's like in this gobbledygook, and then when they do this chemical procedure in this physiological pressurization, it's gonna make Legos. That's natural. Like it's natural because it's from the continuum of existence, which you consider nature already. And I think that people are finally starting to realize that because of AI.
Well, yeah, because
people know they're going to sync with AI now. People are starting to understand like that's going to happen.
Well, I don't even know if you need to sync. I mean, it depends what you mean by sync. It's like just even seeing, like imagine if everyone had a word processor that, could be kind of filling in, like any essay you're writing, like sort of like standard, like it's just guessing, like it's just constantly learning from your own writing and like filling gaps in between texts. I mean, what it like can lead to is like this almost like aesthetic distance between yourself and the words. Like this experience can be attained by like reading a lot, like traditionally, like, you know what I mean? You read a lot until you like sort of, there's so many ways that people use words, so many different experiences. You get a self-consciousness about like the way that people are like, in various ways guided by their use of like thinking in certain kinds of metaphors and like not other metaphors and like applying certain patterns of language. And it's like, in your own writing, for example, like my own writing, like I'm thinking like, oh, well, I'm like way more sophisticated. Like I'm like more, But
All right.
yeah, I mean, I would say I am, but
But that's because you went back to the root of it. You went to the need.
Yeah, like sure, totally. Yeah, like in my case, but what I'm saying is like
no big deal.
Suppose a person's never going to read a book. Being able to engage with like a language, artificial intelligence, you know what I mean? Like we'll be able to give them a distance about how, words work, power of words. You come to like a certain self-consciousness, which might be great. And go some way of, solving some of the problems that you alluded to.
I think that it creates context. New problems, though.
It's like
it's new solutions and new problems.
It's like the democratization of context. Like now you have to like read all the fucking books or like get a degree in it. You know what I mean? To even begin to understand the context. But this can give you it like it's like a gist of it.
Well, that's what we do now. Is we study primarily for context, and then when you're older, you start to try to have more agency and do critical thinking. And those are the real people that make the money. Those are the real people that move the world. Because if you're a mere archivist, then and you don't know how to leverage context, then you're actually increasingly less useful. Because ironically, and I mean not even ironically, it makes sense that AI would fill in and computers would fill in that gap first, because that's the same thing that we teach young children first. We don't teach them about critical thinking.
Yeah, I think it's a good analogy.
We teach them about contextualization, because it's like, what do you think? The ice cream or dinner with the family? They're going to be like, ice cream! Because, of course, they don't understand the context behind it. And so the critical thinking, in a way, is sort of moot. Now, you could argue just the opposite, and I would agree at the same time that you have to experience that critical thinking for the better and for the worse, and just for the experience. It's not even about better or worse. Like, yeah, go for the ice cream. Yeah, do that. Let your child decide the trajectory of the dinner.
Transcending doesn't mean annihilating.
No. I mean, it does in a way. This actually goes quite well into ayahuasca.
Okay, yeah.
So I did ayahuasca a little while ago. Since in between our last podcast, I did ayahuasca, and it was an incredible experience. It was really, really transformative. It was so powerful that I can't fully describe it. I think I probably have only processed about 35% of it, if to even put a percentage of those type of things. And that's just with the meta awareness that I have now. That might get completely blown out of the water in like a couple months time or something, depending on how things go. But the interesting thing about ayahuasca is that my friend who had given it to me, they had said, if acid and mushrooms is like a 5, then ayahuasca is like 500. And so it's just a completely different paradigm of existence. And the interesting thing about, I don't know about everyone. I mean, I know some people are like, I'm just going to take acid on like a Monday, and they have to like work the next day, and they worked all day, and they're not even like going to a show, and they're not even going to do anything. They're just going to like, I'm just going to like watch Netflix and just like eat this popcorn and, like reheat this boxed meal or something. And they're like, that's really what they want to do. And if that's really what you want to do, that's fine. But I find that for a lot of experiences in my life, psychedelics included, I use them to level up and to understand more about reality and myself and the nature of existence. Not surprisingly if you're watching this podcast. But I say that because I had almost no benefit to ayahuasca immediately after I took it. I felt almost no benefit at all. But every single minute that passed after, I compounding, I felt more and more better about having the experience. It's really interesting because when I had the experience, I've got about 50 or so plants in my house now. And so I just grabbed a bunch of them that I wanted and I put them in my circle on my lower floor, and I surrounded myself with them, and we had a ceremony. It was fantastic, right? But one of the things that I have is a giant succulent pot. It's filled with like 15 succulents. You've seen it, right? Mm-hmm. And so at some point during the ceremony, I black out. And then I come out of the ceremony and I wake up and I'm wrapped up in my blanket and I am covered in dirt. I am completely fucking covered in dirt. I had dirt in my fucking eyes, dude. Eyeballs, like literally like so far inside my ears. Oh my God, it was everywhere. And I was like, what the fuck? And then I was like, all the plants are gone too. Like, what the fuck? Is this magic or something? Like, what happened? And so my friend comes down and they were like, yeah, I heard a sound. I was upstairs for a minute. And when I came down, I thought, is that coming from outside? And when I came down, you were like hand over fists, like just scooping up the succulent pot and going everywhere with it. And I was like, fuck. And so then they said they grabbed the plants and they put them upstairs. So I didn't do that to the rest of them, thank God. But the crazy thing is, dude, I was a little bit disoriented after that happened, right? But I was like, even in my state, just immediately after that, I was like looking at this giant fucking pile of dirt all over my carpet on my bottom floor. And I was just like, fuck, dude, this is going to take forever to clean up, right? But I'm looking at this giant pile of dirt and I'm confused because I'm like, there's like 7 succulents here. There's like, I can see them. In this pile of dirt, there's like 7 succulents. There's like 8 succulents missing from this. I didn't go upstairs during this. There's no other rooms in the house. There's no dirt trailing into any other area of this room. Where the fuck are all these succulents? And I had no idea.
Did you eat it?
I had no idea. So I'm like really confused. And my friend's like, the best thing to do after you finish these experiences is to sleep. And so I was like, okay. And so I got some Indian food, which was definitely the right move because Indian food is the best. And that's a fact. And then I went to bed. And when I woke up the next morning, I was still like, what the fuck happened to all my fucking succulents? And it's funny. So I realized I ate them. Dude, I started to remember that I was chewing on something and that I felt that this I didn't realize the next day, but I realized a couple days, I was like I wanted to be like close to the earth. And I like wanted to like feel like, I guess like whatever type of feelings I got from all that dirt in my fucking eyes. But, I sort of had this feeling, and I've had this feeling before, but of, I'm just basically this dirt. Like I'm just sentient dirt, like a slight configuration of atoms, and like, here we are. And yeah, I ate them. I ate like 8 succulents, man. And like I completely ate them because there was no remnants of them.
Well, how did you feel afterwards? I mean, like
the funny thing was is that
they sustained you. Like maybe you've discovered your food.
You fast.
Oh yeah, you're probably really hungry.
You fast the day of.
Okay, yeah.
And you cleanse the entire week of. And then, so I hadn't really eaten anything. And I took this huge shit that night after the ayahuasca thing. And I'm like, okay, but I haven't eaten in like 36 hours. And I'm like pretty good at clearing my bowels when I poop. So I was like,
is that when you
began
to suspect?
Yeah. Well, I was like, I didn't connect it at the time that night, but I was looking at my poop and I was like, this shit looks fucking weird. And yeah, so that's what happened. But the funny thing is, about it not being beneficial at first, but being so beneficial increasingly every moment after, is that I I laughed to my friend. I was like, wow, I paid all this money to destroy my succulent pot. Because I didn't really I hadn't processed like anything.
Well, I think it goes to your message about, going outside more, because, I mean, I think that, the problem is really the carpet.
Yeah, if it was just regular brick, it would have been fine. But anyway, we're dirt. But every moment since then, I've felt more secure in myself than I ever have. I feel more comfortable being insecure than I ever have. And I feel more comfortable being sober. I vastly appreciate being sober more. And the two other things are, it's made me certain knowledge that I sort of had in my mind, but I didn't embody it, like I didn't live it. I started to embody it. And what I mean by that is, when I was telling you earlier about the coffee. So coffee for me, one of the biggest things in my life. I mean, not like on a gargantuan scale, but it's up there. I mean, I drink espresso almost every day. When I was in Asia Pacific, I probably went to quite a few hundred cafes. I've probably been to like 1,000 cafes in my life just so far. Drinking espresso from all over is one of the things I really like to do. And my friend had told me, they said, post ayahuasca, you're not going to be the same. They said, I used to drink coffee. I couldn't drink coffee after, but I thought, well, that's probably not going to happen to me because I have this crazy relationship with coffee. And I don't want to stop. I'm enjoying my relationship with coffee. Dude, I go to a cafe every Saturday. I go to La Colombe on Saturdays in Center City, and I have an espresso and just have a sit and have a talk with my friends that are there, and just a generally relaxing, good time. I had an espresso on Saturday. It was the worst espresso I've ever had in my life. And I was like, wow.
Like, did it taste?
It tasted atrocious. I didn't want it. And it didn't feel good.
Gosh, you wonder,
it was repulsive.
Like maybe the ayahuasca changes like the nature of like certain like receptors, like which are like bound to by caffeine or like some other chemical. Like in the coffee. Like this is like an experience I always had. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean the same thing happened with me and sugar, where I was.
Because it just reminds me of like, isn't that what's it, methadone or whatever? It's like if you take it, then like heroin, like whatever, it changes valence or something. Like it doesn't, it makes you sick.
Oh wow!
Like
I've never done methadone or meth, or together.
So. Or what's it? I think there's like, but
I'm feeling really good. The fourth thing that I'll finish on with the ayahuasca thing is that, for the most part, I've taken a lot of. I don't know. I met a dude. I met a couple people that have just done it so many more times than me, even like relative to my age. Like I met a dude recently who had done mushrooms. Like he said he had done it mushrooms hundreds of times. I've probably done mushrooms like 15 times. And I've probably done acid around like 10 times. So that's like nothing compared to this guy. And he was like 25 or something. And he was really successful, He actually, I don't want to talk too much about him, but he was doing well. He was doing well. And,
well, everyone's different.
Yeah, everyone's different, basically. But I've had times in my life where I've taken psychedelics and things like that, and I think a lot of people can relate to this. And not even just with psychedelics, with experiences, with certain types of like really potent experiences. They're like, I'm going to do this because I want to try to figure this out, or I feel lost, or I need to like what to make of this thing, or like where do I go from here, or am I doing the right thing? And my life has never been better. And then I take ayahuasca, and the great thing was that it, for the most part, just said you're actually doing really great. And if you can just maintain the course that you're on and just build from here, you're going to do so well. That's what I realized from the ayahuasca more than anything. It was like, okay, so let's just see if
That's
I
a
can,
beautiful, yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
see if I can hold it.
Yeah, like I think all the time about, it's like we remember stuff, and that's in a way bringing like a brain state like from the past into the present. But so much more difficult it is to recover some of like the really powerful brain states. Like it's just hard to sit down and write a novel or something. Like there's like a kind of, you got to get into a state of mind.
Yeah.
It's kind of deep,
and it's
like,
not
for a extended period of time.
It's not a day state of mind. It's not an hour state of mind. It's a continuum.
Yeah, like how do you maintain that? And it's like, okay, you get into the state and you do some work, and and then thinking about it, years later, or something, you're like, it's interesting. Or like when you're doing math or something, it's like you see it all in your head, and then like a couple months later, you're like staring at a page, and holy shit. Like you still know it, but you're like, it's just so much less present. But yeah, so if you get into a particular, I like to think about like energy eigen state, it's like,
what's an eigen state?
Oh,
or am I going to regret asking?
Just a kind of like, was just thinking about the brain as kind of like having.
Could you fill us with water?
Different kind of oscillatory modes, some of which might be higher and lower frequency or energy or something. Anyway, just kind of like an analogy.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I mean, with psychedelics, right? I remember with Molly. Molly's not a psychedelic, but Molly I would consider very beneficial. I've done Molly like a few times as well, but and I don't want to give people the idea that I do psychedelics. I mean, a lot. I mean, like I said, like the number of times, like in the tens, over the course of years, I remember I was talking with a dude the other day, and he's like, "Yeah, man," and I've got love for this guy, but I'm not. I mean, it's not going to be a surprise. I mean, I don't even know if he's ever going to hear this, but Kenny, like, you shouldn't do acid twice in the same week, like, especially like multiple tabs, like each time. Like, he's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna like. He's just like, I just watched Netflix like all night.
Well, like you're saying, the key is that.
And then he's like, I'm gonna do it again a couple days later, and I'm like, dude, like, what the fuck? But for me, I'm doing it, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm like really, really happy right now on this Molly, right? And I have so much love for these people and stuff. How do I accrue that state of being when I'm not doing this? Because I can't do this all the time, and I don't want to do this all the time. So how do I accrue that state of being all the time,
Yeah. Totally. Like learning, this is what's good in this experience. Now I know what that brain state's like. Can I induce it, at will, whatever I want? Yeah. Pick and choose.
Can I just write a novel at will?
Yeah, instead of just like relying on the drug. But like, yeah, using it as like a contrastive and like imaging technique. You know what I mean? Like you're saying, it's like less the ayahuasca experience in the moment, in itself, so much as the contrast that comes afterwards. Sort of like, I'm happy to be here.
That's really important. If you don't have that, you're basically, if you're going on the path that I'm on of like using it to your benefit later on and try to help a more meta version of yourself in a way. But if you're not, but you're not appreciative of where you are when you're not there, you're basically in spiritual escapism. Like, I knew this dude that I lived with in Australia, and this guy was fucking miserable. He was so fucking miserable, dude. He basically wanted to drop out of the reincarnation cycle because he didn't want to live anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's not when you drop out of the reincarnation cycle, man. Like, at least in the premise of that whole like ethos, the whole ethos behind it is, okay, you're going to drop out of the reincarnation cycle when you have no attachment to things in this plane of existence. That's when it happens. Not, oh my God, I fucking hate these things in this plane of existence. And I hate them so bad, and I hate myself so much that I'm gonna drop out of the reincarnation cycle. Like, no, like it doesn't work that way. And it was, man, I mean, I've seen a couple people like that, but I mean, I lived with the guy, so I'd never seen it as bad as that. But it's gruesome.
What else did this person think they needed to do to drop out of the cycle of reincarnation? Like beside, like was
he
it
didn't even know
through his like contemplative practice of hating that?
No, well, he didn't even know. That was the thing, was that he was lost and he was searching for a methodology from a guru or a mystic or whatever.
Well, right. Well, what I was going to say is like
confirmed his ideology enough of the escapism. They're like, oh, you don't have to do anything to be enlightened, blah, blah, blah. It would always be things like that. And it's like, yeah, that's true. You just have to be yourself. But you are the biggest thing in the way of your own enlightenment at all times, because you're the only thing that's ever present in your life. And then we go to the God discussion. What's God? You know, you guys have heard this before. So that's where he was at. And so like one of his favorite things to do was he loved disassociatives, where he would black out and he wouldn't remember anything, and then he'd wake up, because it was like the ultimate escape.
Yeah, like preferring the act of trying to remember more than that act of actually experiencing.
No, he didn't want to remember.
Does he want to?
No, not even. No, one more step from that. He preferring the act of numbness than, you know, not trying to remember to not experiencing. Because the thing about, because he gave me a little bit of this cough syrup, and I'd never really done cough syrup or anything, but he gave me some one night, and it was terrible. It was just a terrible experience. I hated it. I mean, because I'm trying to do the opposite.
Yeah.
Is what I also realized, is I'm trying to do the opposite of disassociate. I'm trying to associate more. So it was really, really not fun. People do things for all different types of ways.
It's so true.
We were talking today, I was laughing, hanging out with my friends, and we were talking about Fishtown, where I used to live. And we were just saying there's like so many hipsters there now. They call it like the new Brooklyn, right? And I don't know. I mean, if you're going to talk literally about like people that do things that are like different and not like other people, like I'm more hipster than like most people in Fishtown. And yet all these people, I mean, of course, like most of these people are not hipsters or whatever. I don't want to be a hipster. Like I don't give a fuck, you know, like who gives a shit? But it's like all these people that are like, oh, this is the fringe. Oh, this is like the resistance. Like, oh, this is the out there thing. So now I'm like, I'm going to be that. It's like, no, motherfucker, no. It doesn't work that way. Why even do things like that? It's fucking stupid, yo. And it's just like, and we were saying the funny thing ultimately with Fishtown is like, Fishtown's awesome because it embodies that stuff. But then people that think that what's important in life is to embody that stuff, ultimately, like that's what they ultimately think is like the pinnacle, is to embody that stuff, try to live there, and then it ruins everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you're not wrong that embodying that stuff can be valuable, because it is, or it can be anyway. It's just that it's not ultimately the end all be all. The ultimate embodying is the embodiment of self, not the embodiment of these stupid Doc Martens you have on, which are fantastic, by the way. You know, in this knit cap you have on. That's not the end all be all here. And yet these people encounter each other and they're like, wow, they just look at them. They're walking down the street and the way that they've got the shoes and I'm into fashion, but the way they've got the pants tucked in the docks, and then they've got like the right cut on their jean, on their mid upper thigh, and then they've got like the worn jacket with like the patches, but not too many patches, and it's like little like frayed at the seams, with the cap, and he's like with the buds, and he's got a cool like graphic tee on, and they're going to the concert, and then somebody just sees them and they're like, wow, what a guy, like what a person who's their own person. And it's like, maybe they're just really good at showing the aesthetic itself and just perpetuating the idea of that, but they don't have anything to contribute to the actual idea. They only know how to be a figurehead for it. And that's what I don't like, because that's boring, because I can't talk to you.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I was just recently having a discussion about just like the nature of clothing and, like a certain conception of religion is like these people hold themselves like apart in the sense of like they had a special relationship with God, which is they like decided to devote their lives to this particular.
Oh man, there's such pretentiousness with that shit.
And then, exactly. Well, so it goes both ways. So it's just like, maybe you're supposed to wear a costume that like distinguishes yourself. So
right.
It's like we have, different religious costumes that you wear.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I think about, there's like other kinds of costumes too, like in the sense of like, you're just wearing a t-shirt, with like some cool stuff on it and like some jeans or like whatever. Like, that's just like the secular like look. Like, you know what I mean? By which I mean, even like post suit and tie.
That's
or like
so
whatever.
fucking
like,
true, yeah.
Because it's a costume as much as any
Yeah,
other.
right. I mean, you can't really
the
get
irony
away
is
from
like
costume.
you dress up as like an archetypal character,
yeah,
or something, and people will perceive it as a costume.
Yeah, like I wear overalls. Everybody's like,
like,
"You're a farmer, Pete." And I mean, I do look like a farmer, but
I was watching these great videos of these like interviews from the '80s with Miles Davis, and she's like always wearing. It's the greatest.
Just like the coolest
I
clothes.
was just like granny outfit that I was like really into.
Miles Davis had a granny outfit. I believe it.
But yeah, I mean, it's as much clothes reveal as much as they can conceal, and it goes.
Wait, can you say that again?
About clothes reveal and conceal in equal parts.
You said they reveal as much as they conceal.
Yeah.
That's a great one. That's a great one. That's so good. It's so true.
And it's just like any platform, like we were talking about before. Different web platforms. People moving from like news groups back in the day to like Slashdot, Dig, Reddit. Various places where and once a discussion. Or a garment of clothing. There's too many people wearing it.
Pink used to be back in
a sect forms. It's just
pink used to be a boys' thing in the early '90s or the early 1900s. In the early 20th century, pink was the boys' preferred boys' color, and blue was the preferred women's color.
Yeah, things flip.
And then it flips. Everything switches, dude. Everything goes in cycles. I haven't heard that one before, folks. Giving people some original content.
Yeah, and just to bring it like all the way around, maybe artificial intelligence can help give people a better sense of time. How costumes.
Well, dude,
there's been some great like art exhibits, like let's say
on costume parties.
Just fashion.
Oh yeah. The Dior one was interesting. Although the thing that I didn't like about the Dior one that was at the Philadelphia Museum of Art was that, I mean, I didn't dislike it for what it was. because I knew that for what I guess I did dislike it for what it was. I knew that it was doing what it was well, but I just didn't like what it was, and that was that it showed me 90% of the pieces were non-functional pieces, and it's just like I hate that shit. I think it's just so boring to me, like because I want to do things, you know, and so like please give me an outfit I can wear, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's actually one of the quotes that I wanted to tell you earlier was something.
Well, I was gonna say that one thing.
Yeah.
Clothing. I just feel like I was just gonna make a hypothesis. Like the more times a day people in a given culture have to change their clothes, maybe like the more likely they are.
With thought, man.
Yeah, and wear cooler stuff. Like
it definitely goes both ways.
Like I don't know, you can imagine some like ancient society where it's like I don't know. That's one of the questions I always wondered. Like how to visualize like the streets of ancient Athens. You know,
yeah,
sure, like they're fucking togas, but like
I wear the hadoop
how many people were just
from dusk till dawn.
Yeah, there's gods and goddesses walking.
The quote that I wanted to tell you, and you'll fucking love this, is Liza told me this. She sent me a quote from George R. R. Martin, and he said, those who don't read live but one life, but a reader lives 1,000 lives before they die. And of course, you can obviously live multiple lives through multiple interfaces. It's not like books are the end all be all, but books are one of the most fantastic interfaces for experiencing a dramatically different point of view. And it's one of the things that
it's still the state of the art in a lot of ways.
Yeah. It still is way state of the art. It's still like ahead of its time, state of the art. Like the thing is like I've started to read again more as Liza's gotten me into it, and she's been giving me a lot of these awesome books by Gabriel Marquez, who we talked about. He like does a lot of like magical realism, and magical realism, for those of you that don't know, is like basically where something is fantastical and not what would be considered realistic in nature, but the way that it's conveyed in the environment around itself would make it seem as if it were normal, magical realism, right? And it began in Colombia sort of around the time of the drug kingpin being sort of embodied on a new level by Pablo Escobar, because he was doing like all these things that were considered like.
Well, I think as a movement started.
Oh, really? Did it start earlier? Oh, did it? Okay.
Wait, because he was publishing stuff in the 60s.
Oh, was he?
I think, 100 years saw in the 60s.
Oh, well. I'm full of shit.
But I mean.
What else is new there? But.
I'm not saying.
No. You're totally right. Thank you for
connection.
Yeah. Thank you for the correction. I really appreciate it. But
Well, and also I would say like, there's also such an interest. A lot of stuff you can say about the history of it.
It's just so cool. Like it actually just because it's so different, like it gives my brain such a rest. Like it gives Pete such a respite to read these books, because it's like I'm reading about this story, right? Like, oh, they just built the town. It's okay. It's been like they like left the village they're from. They went through the swamps and they like built this village, and it was all fine and good. And the gypsies would come like every spring, and they would bring fantastic inventions from across the world, like flying carpets and alchemizers that would turn things into gold. And then this one day, a traveler comes into town, and they have insomnia. But in this world, if you have insomnia, it's an incurable disease that's contagious. So when you get insomnia, you never go back to sleep, but you get way more done. But you gradually forget everything about your life. And so this guy has sex with this traveler, and then everybody in the town gets insomnia. And then at first they're like, this is fucking great. And they're like making all these things that they're like, I wanted to do this for years. And like the wife's like, man, my garden bed's just never been better, and like all this stuff. And then everybody starts forgetting, like, where did I put my garden hoe? Like, where the fuck is the church in the town? And then it gets like, so then they have to start writing like signs on everything, and it's so fucking cool. they're getting super meta with it, like things like God exists. They have to like write a sign. They write a sign in the town on the church. That's what they write on the fucking face of the church is God exists, and all this other stuff. But they're starting to realize whenever they remember to convene in town, they're starting to realize that as complicated as their signage has become, they're going to forget what the very words in the signs mean. And so they're about this. The village is on the brink of destruction. And they end up finding. They do end up finding a cure, but it's like what? Like that would never happen. But
yeah, it's a mix of like
fable,
but like told in
told in a matter of fact.
It's
so matter of fact that you're like, oh right, of course. Incurable insomnia, it's contagious. And I remember after I read that passage, I just felt so good because I realized I hadn't been living life as Pete for like 30 minutes or something while I was reading. And then I came back and I was like, wow, it was a really nice rest. And what a great adventure I was on while I was gone. It's just the same with like dreams, right?
Yeah, sure. Have you had any interesting dreams since the ayahuasca trip?
I've had a lot of interesting dreams. I don't smoke weed as much as I used to because of ayahuasca. I just don't have as much interest in it. And when you smoke weed, you don't really like remember your dreams as much and shit. But now like my dreams are getting really, really vivid and stuff. Like on Saturday, so on Friday night, like after post ayahuasca trip, I woke up Saturday morning and I literally had a premonition. So I was hanging out with my buddies, Matt and Josh. Shout out to Matt and Josh. I love you guys. So I was hanging out with two of my best buddies from Australia, Matt and Josh, in the dream. And then I wake up and I look at my phone and they texted me. They had texted me and it was like, whoa. And on Friday, the day before the ayahuasca trip, I dreamt about New Zealand and then the shooting happened.
Dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun.
So, yeah, it's really interesting. I think that dreams are a very powerful channel for me to like experience life. Like it would seem like a lot of the times when I'm waking up that I've just wrapped up a glorious epic of a life in a dream, and now I'll never remember it again. But does it even really matter because it's over?
I know. I struggle with that feeling a lot.
Of like all these friends that I make in these dreams, because I make a lot of friends in dreams and do a lot of stuff.
Really? Like that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like one of my, and I think it's partially for my travels too, from like making so many friends during my travels and stuff. But one of the things that's really a recurring dream is falling from the sky, but like in a really controlled and non-disastrous way, where we're falling from the sky and then we're in these giant jungles that are like way big, that are like is like trees as big as skyscraper jungles. And we're like, I remember the last one I had, which was on Thursday. That it was like Thursday, or it was on Wednesday, Thursday was this one, and then Friday was the New Zealand dream, and then Friday night into Saturday was the Australia dream. I had this dream where I was hanging out in like somewhere that was sort of Thailand-esque, but on a major, like way bigger scale, like cliffs that were like miles and miles high, and then it was like this plateau, and then this out to the sea, but like, so it was like this cliff, but then where the sea was, there was before the beach and then this cliff, there was like a gigantic jungle. And so we jump off of the cliff and we're like swinging through the fucking vines and just running. We were just like flying through the trees. It was really fun. Really, really fun.
Yeah, that's a wonderful dream.
One of the things that I think about with AI is everybody's like, why don't we see any signals from any other civilizations and stuff? And maybe it's like by the time a civilization is complex enough to like do intergalactic travel or whatever, the singularity has already happened. So then what happens when the singularity happens is they've melded with the machines after a couple of generations. They're like, we don't really need to go out into the universe. Like, why don't we be more efficient and like create the craziest microscopic fucking culture that has like the power of suns, but in like a grain of sand. You know what I mean? And it's like this tiny little micro civilization that exists on this massive planet.
Yeah, I mean, I've often wondered that. Because, it's like,
why does it have to be macro? Like, why wouldn't it be micro necessarily if you're going to be super sustainable, like AI smart shit?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I still don't know. Is it worth going to the stars as a basic question? I don't even know how I feel.
To hasten the entropy of the universe, it is.
Entropy. Yeah, there's a certain charm to that, right?
Well, that's sort of like the point of existence in a way. It's like, why did the universe decide to exist? It's like, well, I guess it needed to figure something out and make something of itself. So why not exist? So here we are. And then, well, you're not only to exist forever. You only need to exist for as long as you need to exist for. So maybe entropy happen, like ultimate entropy occurs once all the things that need to have happened happen. And then maybe there's some disturbance event where the Big Bang happens again. That's what I think happens.
I mean, maybe that might describe the dynamics of like a universe in some way or other, but I don't know if that describes everything. I just feel like, I don't know if it's possible to enumerate all the possible things.
No, well, it would be impossible to do that because infinities just branch off of each other at every moment in time, as you know.
Yeah, well, it's like an interesting question whether, truly unpredictable things can happen.
No, nothing unpredictable can happen.
It's hard to know. I mean, I was thinking about some of this stuff because I was talking with my friend the other day, and he'd just been reading a book I read a couple years ago called like Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom. And, it's just about like AI risk and like existential risk, just like the crazy, humanity threatening events that like you might want to prepare for something. I mean, asteroids.
Dude, we don't even prepare for heart disease. We're worried about people breaking into our houses.
Yeah,
heart
I know.
disease is killing us.
Yeah, right. So it's like the scale between like what could be done, and like what is like probably going to be done. It's like staggering. It really does make you think. But like he was just talking about like these kind of like a filter event. You know what I mean? Like, why don't we see aliens? Because when you get advanced to a certain point, on average, things that choose the sequence of actions tend to die out, and so then one can speculate: have we, we were talking about? He's like, have we passed this point of no return, or it's in the future, or similar to as you're saying about like the singularity or something.
I was thinking about the idea of the Earth being flat the other day, but in a different way. It's like, well, space-time is actually flat. And so it's only curved by things with mass.
Well, I mean, energy.
Yeah.
That's what you mean by.
Yeah. Well, energy.
I mean, you can have.
So
the gravitational field.
It's not Earth, but like
kind of reflexive.
Existence itself is
gravity gravitates.
Yeah.
So it actually doesn't need matter. Like gravity itself can gravitate because all forms of energy feel gravitation.
You lost me.
It doesn't really, I suppose, affect. Well, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, like, I guess the whole like why people want to believe the Earth is flat thing is they're like there's something they're not telling us. Like there's some type of possibility out there that they don't want us to know about. Like it always seems like that's the trope, right? That's the trope for the people that don't want to believe the world is round or something, because then they're like confined to this circle. And it's like, well, in a lot of ways, there is no secret in a way. It's just like hard work and like, can you be smart enough to like make whatever you want happen?
Yeah, that's the other thing.
And people don't want that to be the truth in a lot of ways, I think. They want some type of mystical potion or like some crazy reptilian thing.
It might not have occurred to them along what avenue the path might lie, the truth might lie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like
inside themselves.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know how many of them know all about like how. I mean, because scientists have discussed like the issue of like curvature and what it means and like various forms of abstraction for like so many years. So I don't know if they.
Well, I do think,
you know, do they perceive those people to have been kind of like in earnest? You know what I mean? In like their investigations of nature, it's like everyone somehow drunk the Kool-Aid.
Well, there's a great quote from Jamila Woods, who's a great artist. You should check her out. What's up, Jamila? You want to come on our podcast? And she says, "I'm a being from inner space," and I thought that was really interesting because I guess kind of existentially, a lot of people would argue like from a soul perspective, that's like what you would be. You'd be an alien from inner space, not outer space, inner space, and you're embodying things more, which makes you come into larger outer spaces, right? In ways. And
well, with like regard to this stuff, I feel like the biggest thing to me that like I feel like has to be internalized, like the thing that underlies like so much of physics is like this sort of idea, and we've talked about it, I guess, on the podcast before, but of like relativity, like in the sense of, you know, two things, you know, what direction are they pointing in space, to have no relationship to each other, you know, basically then when they're brought together, it's going to be like a random orientation because there's like no reason for it to be anything else
than what it is, really.
And so you're thinking about like the world in terms of like everything, you know, relative to some.
Yeah, it's so much of it is just pattern recognition. And
so much of how we, and so much of what we think about the world is like the world is like a container, right? Like there's the world and it's like a container, and there's like things in the world and like they do the shit and like whatever. But like really, it's like there's some notions of like things coming into relation and like losing relations like with each other, but like without a container, you know? And it's like, I feel like that.
Yeah, I think that's the funny thing, right? Is because it's all up to the container, because you'll have people and they'll be like, Galileo, shut the fuck up about this Earth not the center of the universe thing, because we're going off all this pattern recognition and contextualization of what we consider. Like whatever you consider your reality is like so largely based off of like how much you can test it, especially like more and more anyway. Actually, Carl Jung has a fantastic example of what early humans that would have just been sentient enough to start like traveling and making tools would have thought of their imaginations, because they would have been like perhaps the first beings that would have been sentient enough to be sentient of what they're thinking, to the extent, but these ideas are so magical to them, right? And it's not like people have said like, oh yeah, just because you can think you can walk on a cloud doesn't mean you can walk on a cloud or something, you know? We're not that far in history yet. And so people are like, oh my God, this thing, and it's just basically God, like just like any idea is just like basically like, whoa, to them. Scale that out toward in more later history or like now, and people are more receptive to other people's ideas, but at the same time, it's like, I don't want to hear from you. I don't want to hear about this or that because it doesn't fit into my worldview of how I'm trying to exist. And most people aren't even that conscious with it. They're not saying in a respectful manner, actually, I want to be voluntarily closed-minded because the existence I'm trying to perpetuate, you either disagree with it or I just don't like it. And it just fucks with it in whatever way. I just don't like it.
Or you may not even know it's possible. Like, I mean, you're so used to thinking about like the world as a container of things.
Yeah.
That like would have never even occurred to you that you could think another way.
Dude.
And so even when they hear people talk who like do understand it,
or a different language,
they might not. Yeah, like they don't even
the
realize like that's the underlying assumption because like the assumption's so strange. You know, how many? But yes, but like also people.
I walked through a town the other day, like a small town, like outside of Philadelphia in the West, and I was getting some plants because they were like, these people were going to go on this like really, really long excursion of the Pacific West Trail. Good for them. And they were going to like sell their furniture and shit. And so I bought like a bunch of their plants. But anyway, I'm walking to their house like when I get dropped off at the train station in the town, Ardmore, I think it was. And you know, I'm wearing like one of my outfits, and I like have a bunch of different styles, especially from like living around the world and stuff like that, and learning from people that had, in a lot of ways, far more style than me. Especially at the time, like I was broke and didn't wear any type of clothes or flip flops everywhere. It's fucking crazy. I remember we're walking on the street, and my brother was like, "Did you see how that dude looked at you?" And I was like, "No." Was it like, whoa, that dude's cool? He was like, no. It was like, what the fuck? And it's like, wow, like this dude lives just a couple miles outside of Philadelphia. And just living a couple miles outside of Philadelphia where like I don't necessarily like dress like other Philadelphians or whatever. I've got like a more like sort of out there style or whatever. But people in Philadelphia aren't giving me like, what the fuck is this looks, you know? Whereas just a couple miles outside of Philly, this guy's like, this does not compute with my worldview.
Well,
do you want to call it?
Yeah.
We actually did like a solid hour and a half at least.
It was great. I'm getting a little hungry.
Yeah? Well,
that's what I was just thinking about.
You know how our munches go.
See ya.
Love you guys.